Hello, everybody. My name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we're going to talk about a woke preacher clip that comes from the Unholy Post with Sky Jethany and Phil Vischer. And of course, we're going to be talking a little bit about David French as well, because this issue about French's support of the Respect for Marriage Act, or the Disrespect for Marriage Act, as it might be more accurately called, is definitely exposing a lot of people, but a lot of these people have kind of already exposed themselves over the years, and it does get into the point about the merits of plurality and the merits of conservatism, one of which I agree with and the other I do not, that this discussion has come up, and Phil Vischer is going after Christians who support legalizing the traditional biblical definition of marriage. So that is the latest news that we're going to cover in today's video. But first, if you are new, do subscribe to the channel and also drop the like button. Early likes really help with the magical YouTube algorithms. And if you really like this kind of content, we have a Patreon-like system here at evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. You can support us for as little as $5 a month, or you can just subscribe to the newsletter, which is free, and there's extra content in the newsletter that doesn't always make it onto a video or podcast. So with that said, let's just dive right on into this video. We're going to be picking up at the 36.5-minute mark, and this is at 1.3 speed to get through this a little faster.
And the big one, it was a lot of smaller voices saying, "We hate you, David French. You used to be a Christian, and now we don't know you anymore." It was a lot of that. That's what little voices sound like. But then the voices get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then Al Mohler weighed in, president of the Southern Baptist Seminary, the largest seminary, I think, in the world. Some people described him as the Pope of Evangelicalism, which is a dumb term because he's not, and not even close. He's just a thought leader in the SBC and a conservative thought leader. He wrote a piece for World Magazine called The Parable of David French.
So what's interesting about the timing of Phil Vischer criticizing Al Mohler is that I do find myself on the side of Al Mohler, despite the fact that I've been highly critical of Al Mohler lately. And that's not because I, have a personal beef with Al Mohler or a vendetta against Al Mohler. I don't have an agenda against Al Mohler. It just so happens, he's been sued for defamation. So that's a story that I cover. He's attacking conservative positions. So that's just something I found interesting and then covered also. So, but here Al Mohler is on the more correct side. I don't necessarily agree with at least their characterizations of his arguments. I don't really agree with or care about, but he's on the right side of this issue, and he's highly critical of David French. Probably not critical enough of David French, because David French is a false believer. He is should be treated as a tax collector at this point because of his support for degeneracy. But let's continue. I just think the context of me defending Al Mohler is kind of funny.
Wow, what a title.
Yeah, I didn't really find the parable in it, because it's not like he planted a field or was, late for a wedding party, or there's nothing, there's no metaphor. There's no parallel.
There's no moral lesson to be learned.
No, there is. So maybe that's all he means. Maybe that's all he means. He criticizes David French heavily for saying that civil same-sex marriage is probably the best agreeable solution for a pluralistic society currently in America. And this is what I wanted to bring up, because Al Mohler, says he's wrong now when he asserts that the Supreme Court sufficiently values religious liberty. In other words, churches are going to be shut down and Christians are going to be thrown in jail if they don't go along with all the new stuff. Then he says this, and this is what I want to get at, one of the most perplexing marks of our time is the defection of so many quote unquote conservatives from the cause of conserving what Russell Kirk called the permanent things. Okay, so the cause of a conservative is to conserve the permanent things. If marriage, this is Mohler talking, if marriage is not conserved, if civil marriage is not conserved, in other words, just the legal definition in our pluralistic culture is not conserved as a man-woman union, then nothing genuinely conservative can last, at least for long. This is how, and this is his concluding sentence, this is how conservatism dies and this is how marriage is surrendered.
So let me just respond to their quote of Al Mohler, because I think Al Mohler here has the right conclusion with the wrong math. I think he's right to say that this is how marriage is surrendered and conservatism dies. I think his math is wrong because because his definition of conservatism is vacuous. And this is going to be the argument that these liberals make, is that his definition of conservatism is so vacuous. It's all about protecting the current thing or conserving the permanent thing. And the permanent thing, if it needs to be conserved, it's not that permanent. So I have an issue with that, just on the premise of it. I view conservatism as more as conserving Christendom, because at the end of the day, the alignment, it's not an accident that everything that the Democrats and liberals believe is evil. It's not an accident. And I mean pretty much everything. It's not an accident. It's not an accident that, and I don't want to give too much credit to organizations like the Republican Party, but it's not an accident that their side of the issue is more biblical on pretty much every issue. You name it in the comment section. If you disagree, you name the issue that the Democrats are more biblical on, and good luck with that. So anyway, that's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. And I'll use Hillsong as a quick anecdote here. Brian Houston of Hillsong is not, in my opinion, he's a false teacher, right? Yet, the people in Australia who really hate God go after him nonetheless, because they don't care about the distinction between who is a real believer and who is not a believer, so much as they want to destroy anything associated with Christianity. They want to destroy God's created order systematically, and that's what much of the homosexual and transvestite movement in the United States and globally is about. It's about systematically destroying and dismantling God's created order, and that is not sustainable. We should be trying to conserve God's created order, because that is wise governance. The job of the government is to punish evil and reward good. We should not be rewarding evil, and then I would argue that the Disrespect for Marriage Act punishes good as well. We should not be advocating for that. And David French and Joe Carter, I did the video on Joe Carter calling Naomi and Ruth a civil union. He basically made that argument. And again, also advocated for pluralism, which is not virtuous. Pluralism is not virtuous. It's not worth conserving because it's unsustainable culturally.
Those are some sweeping statements.
The broad statements. But here's what I just wanted to point out, because I just find this fascinating. What he doesn't talk about in this is Christianity. What he doesn't talk about this.
Sure he does.
Jesus never comes up.
Yeah,
Christianity doesn't come up.
Well, he said conservatism.
The church.
For him, that's Christianity.
He is not defending the faith in this. He's defending conservatism. Conservatism has become the thing that we are supposed to fight for.
This is a logical fallacy. I don't know if Jesus comes up in David French's article, because that was, I'm not giving him my email or whatever. But even in the Joe Carter article, which defended David French, it's not like Jesus really came up in that article. I mean, if you're just sprinkling the name of Jesus to make a good or bad argument, there's objection would still stand. This is a false objection, in my opinion. It's because, first of all, there's the Augustinian notion of all truth is God's truth. And defending the created order is defending the kingdom of light, as opposed to advancing the kingdom of darkness, which these clowns are doing.
Not Jesus, not the faith, not the church. And I'm just trying, even the notion that nothing genuinely conservative can last. at least not for long. How do we know if that's not a good thing? How do we know what isn't good to conserve? If our only value is conservation of what Russell Kirk called the permanent things, and now who gets to decide what are the permanent things? Where does that come from? Because
exactly.
for 100 years, what conservatives fought to conserve in America was racial hierarchy. That was the number one thing conservatives were fighting to conserve, because that was a permanent thing, because that was God established, because that was in the Bible, because the one thing that all Confederate theologians agreed on in 1865 was that the Bible was on their side. It was clear the Bible does not have any problem with slavery, so we are trying to conserve the permanent things. Slavery has always been a permanent thing in history. These northern Yankees who don't know how to read the Bible are trying to take away our way of life, and we must conserve it. So now we say, oh, yeah, but they were wrong. Oh, yeah, that wasn't one of the permanent things. Now we know what the permanent things are. And the permanent things are the nuclear family, as came into existence in 1952. Wow. That's a permanent thing. And heterosexual marriage. What else is permanent? Gun rights are permanent. Yeah. And small government is a permanent thing. And a big military is a permanent thing. These are the permanent, because these, if you look at the history of what the conservative movement in America has been fighting for, it has changed over the years to kind of fit. Same thing with progressivism. We fight for different things depending on where we are, where we're situated, what period we're in. So to say all of this, I can decry David French as a heretic because he is not trying to conserve my permanent things.
The reason why David French is a heretic is because he slanders the brethren on a daily basis for a living, not just to a Christian, not just to the church. He slanders the brethren, but he also slanders the brethren to a pagan audience. That's why David, French should be avoided, marked and avoided, and trolled and mocked relentlessly. So, let's break down a few things. First of all, Phil Vischer's history is really bad. It is really, really bad. He doesn't understand the Civil War. He doesn't really understand the theological arguments between the northern Christians in the North and Christians in the South. He doesn't really understand that, the nuclear family has kind of pretty much always really existed. And that, again, only in recent decades has a gay marriage even been a conversation. So, and then I would like him to offer what good thing has progressivism fought for. The 16th Amendment, the 17th Amendment, the 18th Amendment, the 19th Amendment. What good things has progressivism fought for? There's a challenge for you.
It's hard to disagree with you, Phil, and I'm not going to.
Thank you.
But it reminds me, wasn't it Mohler not that long ago who said any Christian who doesn't vote the right way is
unfaithful to God.
Unfaithful to God. It's very similar linguistically here, because for decades and decades, so many white evangelicals have been told that conservatism is the Christian point of view. Yeah. To the point where you no longer have to say that. All you have to say is conservative, or the conservative party, or the conservative point of view. And people, their brains automatically associate that with Christianity, the Bible, Jesus, God, faithfulness. They have done such a brilliant job of branding conservatism as inherently Christian that the brain does it automatically. And therefore, anybody who has a progressive point of view on anything is automatically not Christian. And that's really amazing when you think about it. It's that complete a transformation of the language that for so many people, he doesn't even have to speak about Christianity anymore. They get it. They get, it's not a dog whistle anymore. It's just it's a referee whistle. People hear it and they get it.
They know which team they're on and who needs to go in the timeout box. Christian, what are you thinking? I can see your wheels turning.
Well, one thing is I remember in the 80s, truthfully, and I am so embarrassed to admit this, but meeting a Christian who was a Democrat and being shocked and just couldn't fathom how that could even be possible. And
that is so based.
Was the way it was back in the 80s in my,
that's
Christian
the way it should be now.
Circle. I mean, fast forward all of these years later, and it's just far worse, where
better.
And I don't know how you unring this bell. How the heck do you unring this bell?
Here's how you unring it.
So let's go back to Sky's comments about the Al Mohler's previous statements about voting Democrat is a sin, which is based. There's no justifiable reason to vote for the Democrat Party. This is not arguing that you have to affirmatively vote for the Republican Party. I'm not arguing that. There's plenty of Republicans that aren't worth voting for. I did not vote a Republican straight ticket in this last election. But there are no Democrats worth voting for. There's not a single Democrat worth voting for in this country. The Democrat Party is worse in many respects and less biblically justifiable in many respects than the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Because, even at the time, because in this current time, there's less biblical justification for voting for that than voting for a more nationalistic, revanchist political party. Let's just be real. So there is less justification. The Democrat Party is on the same level as the Chinese Communist Party. Same level as the Liberals and the Tories not the same level. The Tories are a little below that, but the Tories I don't think are justifiable to vote for. And pretty much all 5 political parties in Canada, I'm not saying there's a lot of areas where Christians really can't vote politically because there's no parties that really align with biblical values at all. And I mean at all. America's lucky to at least have at times candidates that, will align with our values. But the Democrats are aligned against every single value of Christianity. Every single value. Not just a few. Every single one. And again, I would challenge you in the comments who disagree. What values do the Democrats actually agree with the Bible on? And from the same premise that the Bible agrees with them on. And for the same means that the Bible prescribes. Because, rhetoric aside, what the Democrats advocate is evil. Process, means, outcome, evil.
Well, it will take forever, but define your terms, okay? Just think about it. Conserving things is not inherently good or bad, depending on what you're conserving. And
Right.
progress is not inherently good or bad, depending on what direction you're progressing in.
Right.
What is inherently good is pursuing Jesus, progressing towards Jesus, conserving what we love about Jesus and believe to be true about Jesus, the orthodoxy about Jesus and the Christian faith. That's worth conserving. Progressing to make people's lives better, that's worth progress on. There's lots of things that we're trying to make progress on, and there's lots of things that we're trying to conserve. Let's just take those 2 terms as moral indicators and throw them away and say to Al Mohler, can we talk about Jesus and can we talk about the Christian faith and stop talking about conservatism? Because that's not the religion we follow.
So
See, the problem with this response is because the context of what Al Mohler was writing about was David French, who routinely calls himself a conservative, it's right for Al Mohler to talk about conservatism. Because, this is where Al Mohler won't go far enough. Al Mohler will not call, to my knowledge, will not or has not called David French a false believer. He has not called him a heretic. And because Al Mohler won't go that far, he's left with defending the merits of conservatism. And basically saying that David French is on the outside of the conservative circle. That's what Al Mohler's doing, and these guys don't get that. They just view Al Mohler as a big voice, and the people that say David French is a heretic are these little whiny voices on the internet, and that's not true.
Just before getting on this recording with you guys, I recorded the last episode of our sub-series, What in the World, which is about the book Inalienable, and had a really interesting conversation with 2 of the authors, Matthew Sorens, who's been on the show many times, and Eric Costanzo. And one of the questions I asked them, and trust me, this relates, is why are so many Christians okay with engaging all kinds of social good and justice efforts in overseas contexts, but chafe against doing that at home in the U.S. or in their own community? And Matthew Sorens gave a really interesting answer. And he said he thinks part of the reason is we're ignorant about the politics in Honduras or Nicaragua or Guatemala or Africa or India. We don't understand how these things break down politically when we go into a foreign country and engage in these social activities. But here in the U.S., when a systemic issue arises that requires some kind of mobilization, community activism, or political activism, we immediately know, oh, well, that's Democratic, or that's Republican, or that's progressive, or that's conservative. And then it clouds our judgment of whether or not I can engage it, because I have to be on my team and not for the other team. And because we don't have those categories for most overseas communities, all we do is go in and ask, well, what does Jesus want us to do here? And we do it. But in America, we don't ask that because we're too beholden to the categories you're talking about, Phil. And it was just a reminder, like, if we could shut down those categories in our imaginations and simply ask, what does Jesus want us to do here? We might be shocked to discover how many things we end up doing that don't conform to the political party that we had belonged to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is some kernel of truth to this. And I think this largely, is an indictment on ideologies like neoconservatism, which is not conservatism. It's, basically we can take America as a proposition nation, which is not a conservative ideal whatsoever. And, we can Patrick Star take America and push it somewhere else. That, I think, is largely where a lot of disconnect comes from. He didn't list any examples, but I can think of examples where this is definitely true, where Christians don't really know how to navigate because they don't understand what the perspective of Christians overseas is. For instance, Christians in Palestine don't like Israel. Christians in Syria were pro-Assad. And then all these, virtue signalers wanted to put Al-Qaeda or Al-Nusra or ISIS in charge of Syria because those were the Syrian rebels, John McCain freedom fighters. So there's instances like that. What do Christians in Russia believe about the special military operation? I'd imagine most of them support it. Are Christians in Iran all for these protests that are going on? I don't know the answer to that. We can suspect that the answer is yes, but I'm also nervous about the feminist undertones of that movement. There might be Christians that oppose that movement because of the feminist undertones. So that's I think a better way to think about it. What do Christians in these other countries believe? Are there any Christians in Brazil that support a communist criminal to become the next president? I'd be hard pressed to think about that. Or even closer, in Canada, do Christians support Trudeau? So, if you're really grounded in a biblical worldview, these issues in other countries aren't that difficult to navigate. They really aren't. And the other thing to talk about is the fact that, and I'll just circle back to the point that I was making, is that if we put ourselves in the mindset of believers in other places, we'd have a better perspective on how they're navigating the issues, and we should trust the believers in many ways, not the establishment, not the religious establishment in these places, but the genuine on-the-ground believers. And I'll do one more example. And this was an article that we covered on Evangelical Dark Web about Richard Land, the former head of the ERLC, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, who attacked in 2014. He was trying to defend, traditional marriage while attacking Uganda for their anti-buggery law, which was based, and basically saying there's not a Christian justification for anti-buggery laws. And that, first of all, do you even American history, bro? Second of all, I bet the Christians in Uganda supported that law. I bet the Christians in Uganda thought that was a no-brainer. That anti-buggery laws are a no-brainer. So these issues aren't that hard to navigate. Liberals, these people who don't have a Christian worldview, can't navigate them because they don't want to, they don't have it. Al Mohler, I think, struggles, and that's why he's defining conservatism so vacuously, and it shows.
The question is, whose version of what Jesus?
Well, exactly, and that's where, if you're a political activist and your priority is amassing as large a voter bloc as you can. And that's whether it doesn't matter what party you're in, or you're in the Green Party or in the Libertarian Party. If you want as many people to line up their morality with your morality, you have to convince them that your morality is biblical. That the Bible promotes big military, small government. And I'm going to find verses to back that up somehow. The Bible promotes private gun ownership, or the Bible promotes school vouchers, or the Bible promotes teachers unions, or the Bible promotes, whatever it is that your side is fighting for. You have to figure out how to find it in the Bible, as opposed to letting the Bible decide what policies you should be fighting for. Or we go backwards.
Or admit that maybe this issue the Bible is silent on, and we just need to have a robust, wise, culturally broad conversation about what we think is the best way forward.
Okay, so this again just ignores the context of the debate. If you're talking about the evangelical voting bloc, the number one issue is abortion. Gay marriage is somewhere in the top 3, I imagine, in the homosexuality transvestite movement. So they're not really down to earth. And here's another fun fact, and you see this a lot with polling, is that the people that are more pro-life are also more conservative. And a lot of conservative activist organizations use the life issue to determine who they want to get in touch with on issues like right to work and other issues. So that's a lot of how it works. And people with a biblical worldview come down on the issues in a largely same way, at least in consequential terms. There are some disagreements, but on a macro issue like abortion, like Canadian euthanasia, like homosexuality and marriage and transgenderism, I think people with a biblical worldview all come down the same way. They don't want that stuff. They don't want a pluralistic society where you can sacrifice your baby to Molech. So, they don't get it. I think a little bit more left.
And agree to disagree at times, and not invoke God in our arguments.
Oh, man. Oh, that's a slippery slope, Guy. That's a slippery slope.
I don't think the Bible has an argument about congressional term limits or socialized medicine.
I saw one in Revelation. It was after 2 terms, lake of fire. 2 terms, lake of fire. That's where it is. Okay, what I found interesting, and we got to wrap this up because we're going long, and we're going to talk to David French on French Friday, more about this fascinating conversation. To me, it felt like Al Mohler gave away the game. When you get right down to it and you realize he's not worried about conserving Christianity or progressing Christianity. He's worried about conserving conservatism. And the definition he's operating under, which he's already he illuminated in depth with his interview with the Wall Street Journal, or with the New York Times, two issues that we have to worry about right now: sanctity of life, which means abortion. It does not mean the death penalty. It does not mean the poor. It does not mean the environment. It does not mean anything else that affects the sanctity of someone's life.
Quality of life issues are not life issues. Abortion. The issue of abortion is about abortion, and or pro-life is about abortion and euthanasia in general. Those are the two issues, because it's about government-sanctioned murder. That's the issue. It's not about quality of life. Death penalty is not murder. You see that repeatedly in the Bible. It's the one law given in all 5 books of the Torah. It's the one law in all 5. Is about killing murderers. Executing murderers. So, not the same stadium, not the same ballpark, not the same league, not even the same sport as a quality of life issue.
Except abortion, he will say, and marriage. Those are the 2 issues that we're supposed to care about, and that means you have to be a Republican or you're not faithful to God.
It's crotch Christianity.
And it's stunning. It's stunning. So it's more important to God that I am a conservative than that I am a follower of Jesus. That is what he's telling me. And you can tweet about that, and I don't care. Okay.
So that's the end. And again, I don't like Al Mohler, so I can't defend him that. If he made a bad argument, he made a bad argument. I can't really defend that because, again, Al Mohler's not willing to go there with David French. Because he's not willing to go there with David French, he opens himself up to being clowned by Phil Vischer, of all people, who, again, is a clown himself and a vegetable, a fruitcake maybe. And Phil Vischer's trying to justify supporting evil. And we saw that a lot in 2020 where Phil Vischer went really, really woke. And we've done multiple videos on Phil Vischer. You know, the famous words of Ratatouille, you know, one can get too familiar with the vegetables, and that's Phil Vischer. He's gotten too familiar with the vegetables. So, because Al Mohler's not willing to go there, but I am willing to go there. And two, if you support the Democratic Party, you're supporting evil policies. There's no if, and, or buts. There's no exceptions to the rule. Democrats vote in a hive mind. And this is something I put on Gab and Twitter recently, was that, you know, a lot of Republicans are celebrating the, you know, Kirsten Sinema as some sort of moderate, rather than just saying, yay, 2024, we can oust her. You know, there's an opportunity there to win a Senate race with more ease. But you see a lot of people in Conservative Inc. celebrate Kirsten Sinema as a moderate, and her voting record is trash. Her voting record, if you go by the Liberty score by Conservative Review, is a 5. You know who actually has the best voting record among Democrats? Ilhan Omar. She is the most moderate Democrat by the voting record. By the voting record. She votes more with us than Kirsten Sinema, Joe Manchin, who's not that far behind. And especially a lot of these other people that are offered up as moderates. So just goes to show, you know, conservatism does actually mean something. And again, people with a biblical view get it. They get it. People that don't have a biblical view, the liberals, they don't get it. And Al Mohler, he's halfway. He's in the middle somewhere. I don't think Al Mohler's a conservative. I've written that in the past. He attacks the conservative position. He tries to be the gatekeeper. You know, no one's more conservative than me, except for like all these other people that will never get acknowledged by him, I guess, or unless they're attacked by him as fundamentalist or whatever. So anyway, that's all I got to say about that. If you liked the video, do also subscribe to the channel if you're new, and check out evangelicaldarkweb.org. All these things linked in the description below. Have a blessed day. I will catch you on the next one. God bless.